It is the 3rd of the 2nd, 2026. The time is 27 minutes past 8 British, and that means, as always, one thing, that there are a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. Mention no names, Adrian Newey, secrets, interviews, AMR 26, a Megatron of an F1 vehicle. It will get techier than techie things, but before we get into some AMR 26 and some Aston Martin shenanigans, we've got to talk about a livery launch. Right, what are we doing here, Williams? Really, who cares at this point? I feel like I'm all livery launched out. Not just for this year, but for the next 10,000. Like, what are we doing here? We've waited a gazillion years to see this car, and then they present this. ¿Qué? No hablo inglés, James Vowles. What are we doing? They best make sure this car's quick. You know what I mean? It needs to make up for what it lacks in aesthetics with on-track performance, because this isn't good enough. And the broader context is that Jimmy V's been talking up Williams' chances, that they were focused on 2026 almost exclusively for the last 3 bloody years. And then the Barcelona private test comes around, and Williams and Jimmy V, Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon are nowhere to be seen. And I would put forth this: Jimmy V, that's not good enough. Sir Frank will be turning in his grave. Williams, once upon a time, mention no names, 1992, Mansell, 1993, Alain Prost ruled the roost. They were God tier, genius innovations, active suspension, etc. And now they can't even get a bloody car together. That's not good enough. Oh, and by the way, Maximilian Verstappen gave an interview in which he talked about his loves outside of racing, and you'll never guess what his loves were. Roll the clip.
The thing outside of racing that you're as passionate about, you're as driven by, that in your flow state, anything outside of racing?
Racing?
Yeah.
But then not racing, not even necessarily myself. But for example, of course, one of my goals is to bring a simulator driver into the real world. That has happened this year already, and he's doing very well. And I just want to try and grow that project naturally, because that is definitely something that I enjoy a lot. And yeah, you know, outside of Formula One for the future as well, because I like being in F1 as a driver. I don't think I would ever come back in F1 as in a management role, let's say like that, but in a different kind of category, more like endurance style. Yes, I do see that happening, and creating that opportunity for young drivers that do not have the funds or, you know, the possibilities of getting into a real racing car, to try and stimulate that from the simulator world as well.
I love.
Oh, the humanity, Maximilian Verstappen. He lives, if only, to race. And I don't hate it. Indeed, some would say that that's the attraction, the central tenet as far as Maximilian Verstappen's concerned, because he's a racing man's racer, and I don't hate it. That's why I'm desperate for this dude to have the car, the machinery, the wheels underneath him, using which he can compete and challenge for a championship. John, you're an absolute legend out here. Elated Peddler settings. If you're a brand new member, get yourself over to the Discord by dint of the community tab. If you are that way inclined. Looking at the odds though, as far as Max Verstappen, which we'll talk to in a couple of minutes, they are drifting, meaning therefore that not a lot of money's coming in on Max Verstappen. You will have heard me say of Mr. Verstappen that you never back against him. Anytime his odds get to a certain point, back him. And again, this is not financial advice, almost without a discerning eye. Do you know what I mean? Almost automatically. However, here is the problem in that equation this time round. Red Bull powertrains. Now we're talking about compression ratios, are we not? And they've leveraged it to a lesser extent than Mercedes. And in a zero-sum game, I think that is a problem. Will Red Bull Ford be quicker than Ferrari? Potentially. Aston Martin? Potentially. But Mercedes power united cars is going to get techier than techie things. And to that point, we're talking about Aston Martin. Adrian Newey is giving an interview. Listen, I've got to lay out the context this way. Adrian Newey is a god tier one. He's the last airbender. Do you know what I mean? Who else, not named Adrian Newey, did his thesis at university in 1980 something in ground effect in sports car? If there is a guarantee as far as an aerodynamicist, performance or race engineer on the grid currently of success in Formula One, then it has a name, and his name is Adrian Newey. He has the ability to troubleshoot for a car. That's exactly what Red Bull were lacking when that RB21 became an understeer merchant. Remember when Max said the car's on -5 brake bias and it won't bloody steer? Well, they didn't have Adrian Newey to go then and fix for it. He understands. He's Neo in the Matrix. Nobody, as far as aerodynamicists or engineers, has won more championships than him in F1 history. 13 constructors, 12 drivers as at last count. So then, when he joins Aston Martin, you've got to think surely he's going to design them a rocket ship in the end. And when we saw it unveiled, it looked like a rocket ship. Adrian, who was giving an interview where he's talked about all and sundry, right? There's been a lot of controversy about him being a team principal when he's not a team principal, not substantively. He's a car designer, the best one. So surely Lance Stroll, if he's had his Weetabix, will let him alone. Give him a pen and a pad and let him design you a rocket ship. Why would you give him a team principal role? Well, Adrian Newey speaks to that in this interview by dint of AstonMartin.com. The role, the engine, the power units, the engine oil, the fuel. So too, he talks about the core weave, the brand new sexy core weave wind tunnel that cost Aston Martin and Lawrence Stroll 50 million. He's talked about the lot. In the first instance, though, I want to show you who Adrian Newey is. If you haven't read his book, How to Build a Car already, what are you doing with your life? I will tell you who Adrian Newey is, and then we'll talk about the interview underneath that aegis. Here's who Adrian Newey is. You'll recall Red Bull. He demanded so much of the gearbox guys that they didn't even want to talk to him. So tightly packaged was it so he could do all of his sexy, aerodynamic, efficient things with the rear of the car then. But when they needed to change it or wanted to even, the likes of Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo were like, hang on, if we're going to change the suspension with a view to dial out some of this understeer and some of these unfavourable characteristics, you have to design the whole entire rear end. That's the Adrian Newey thesis, right? That you got to design your cars holistically. That's out of that circumstance even comes the efficiency and therefore the lap time. This on the right hand side of your screen is a picture taken from the Adrian Newey book, How to Build a Car. In it, he talks about an argument that he had with Rob Marshall when they were building one of the Red Bull iterations. Adrian Newey said, as far as the KERS, RB7 if I recall correctly, as far as the KERS, why don't you put the battery at the back? Rob Marshall's like, what are you talking about, Adrian? That's it. That's incredibly unreliable. Make it all hot. What are you doing? This is nonsense. Adrian said, no, trust me, mate. You've got to put it at the back as far as weight distribution because that allows us, therefore, to push the engine forward. Rob Marshall was like, this is impossible things, chap. But the reason why Adrian Newey demands so much of the other departments is because he's so keen to lock in this advantage going forward. And in this interview, he says just as much. That the car that you saw during the private test at Barcelona is nowhere near as advanced as the car that you will see at Bahrain, because he's locking in advantage here when talking about, so he talks about different bits and bobs. He's asked which one of the bits on the Aston Martin AMR26 is your favourite. Adrian Newey says there's no part on there that I would say, Mum, look at the thing that I've done. The genius in the car is its holistic design. There's no fat on it. It is design synchronicity embodied. Pablo Elizalde's settings. Here's what he says. Asked when can you break down the design approach a bit more? It starts with the overall package of the car, says Adrian Newey. Quote, where is the car carried over the wheelbase? Where are the main masses carried? Then it's worked through to the front and rear suspension, he says. The front and rear suspension both have their very own important part to play in that manipulation of flow field. You've got the front wing and the nose shape, which are somewhat different this year. You keep moving through the side pods and the treatment around the rear of the car, which is certainly different to what we've done previously. Tightly packaged settings so we can do all of the sexy aerodynamic efficient things at the back. Now, he says, whether other people come up with a similar solution to ours, we don't know and we won't know until we start seeing other people's people's cars. We've just tried to pursue what we think is the correct direction for us, new rules and regs. Remember, other people might have pursued other directions. It's part of the excitement of the new regulations, seeing what everybody comes up with. I'm scared now for the rest of the teams, I'll be honest. When Adrian Newey starts to talk like this, that makes you know that he's done something sexy. What's different comes the next question. Adrian Newey cracks a wry smile. He can barely conceal his grin. Question comes this way. When you say the treatment around the rear of the car is different to what we've done previously, you're talking about how tightly packaged it is. Adrian Newey hallmark settings, RB7, put the bloody KERS battery at the back right next to the bloody engine where it's most temperamental and subject to reliability issues. This is the Adrian Newey philosophy. You're talking about how tightly packaged the rear end is, suspension et al. Trait of many Adrian Newey designed F1 cars. Adrian Newey responds this way. Yes, the car is tightly packaged, much more tightly packaged than I believe has been attempted at Aston Martin before. Adrian at this point can't hide his grin. This has required a very close working relationship with the mechanical designers to achieve the aerodynamic shapes we wanted. But I have to say that all the mechanical designers here have really embraced that philosophy. It hasn't made their lives easy, quite the opposite, but they've really risen to the challenge. No kidding, Sherlock, because that's what this dude does. When having a conversation in the How to Build a Car book, Adrian Newey's book, he talks about the disagreement with Rob Marshall. He says, I was insistent on the placing of the KERS battery. Look, Rob, I'm so sorry, quote, and I know it's going to be difficult to place the KERS there, but not only does putting them in this location give us a good advantage going forward, but it's an advantage that we will have locked in because it will simply be impossible for a team over the course of the season to build that in. It's a fundamental part of the architecture. Therefore, this is what Adrian Newey does, chat. He front loads all of the advantage. You can't just look at an Adrian Newey car. It's not a wing. It's not a bloody front wing. It isn't something. It isn't the bloody horns. It's nothing that you can tack on. The Adrian Newey advantage is deep-seated, fundamental. You can't just engineer it in after the fact. It's embedded in the holistic nature of the design philosophy. Can you say design synchronicity? My feeling, says Adrian Newey in his book, was that it ought to be possible to put the KERS battery at the back, RB7 settings. So I drew some layouts. It split the battery into 4 units, 2 mounted inside the gearbox. Wow, 2 mounted inside the gearbox case, just in front of the clutch, and 2 mounted alongside, but on the outside of the gearbox case. I drew, so listen, he's hard to work with, right? He's not easy, this Adrian Newey chap. If you're a gearbox dunny or an engineer, to work alongside this chap is always going to be difficult because he's going to ask you to do some borderline impossible things around the tightly packaged rear. Here's what Adrian Newey had to say. The car is tightly packaged, much more tightly packaged than I believe has ever been done. It required working closely. We've read that out already. Demanding of the engineers, both mechanical and aerodynamic. The AMR technology, okay, so we're talking about the campus now. Talks about the campus, talks about the fuel, talks about the demand on Aramco and the engine oil manufacturer. Here, as far as the technology. Now, look, Lawrence Stroll isn't wanting for a couple of quid. We know already that he's invested 250 million in the factory and another 50 million in the core weave wind tunnel, which is state of the art. And he speaks to this, does Adrian. The AMR Technology Campus is still evolving. The core weave wind tunnel, sponsored by, wasn't on song until April, and I only joined the team last March, so we've started from behind. But in truth, it's been a very compressed time scale and an extremely busy 10 months. That's why they had to rock up late, right? Because Adrian Newey wants to front load this. He wants to take all the time that he needs before they go to the bloody private test, but they still got more laps than Williams. The reality, continues Newey, is that we didn't get a model of the 26 car into the wind tunnel until mid-April, whereas most, if not all of the other teams, would have had a model in the wind tunnel from the final moments of 2026 aero testing ban ended the beginning of January last year. That put us on the back foot by about 4 months, which has even meant a very, very compressed research and design cycle. The car only came together very last minute, which is why we were fighting to make it to the Barcelona shakedown. Listen, this is important, chat. There's a paragraph in his book where he speaks about how quickly he works when he's in full flow state. He says that when he's on the money, Adrian, again from his How to Build a Car book, when he's on the money, he says that he takes up another 2 designers. He's drawing, and he's just casting away the pieces of paper to these bods so that they can go and upload it to CAD. Not 1, 2. That's how quickly this dude is working, how efficient he works. Look, he continues, we've attempted to build something, talking to the design philosophy fundamentally, we've attempted to build something that we hope will have quite a lot of development potential. Now, you've heard the rumour that Aston Martin are going to go from here to here over the course of the championship because everything's in there already. Now, there's a question about the Honda PU, to which he speaks shortly, but bet your bottom dollar if there's advantage that they could have front-loaded, that Adrian Newey has done. We've attempted to build something that we hope will have quite a lot of development potential, locking in all of the advantage, therefore, that he can. What you want to try and avoid, is a car that comes out quite optimized with its window but lacks a lot of development potential. We've tried to do the opposite, which is why we've really focused on the fundamentals, put our effort into those, knowing that some of the appendages, wing, bodywork, things that we can change over the course of the season will hopefully yield developmental potential. Techie, I'm telling you, chat, I'm a bit nervous. I can't even lie. He goes on to talk about Honda, etc. So too the manufacturers of the oil. Here's what he has to say. In fact, before I get to that, I'll tell you about the team principle. Lest we forget. Only not long ago, 24 hours ago, I had a chat with Peter Windsor about Newey and this team principle role, to which friend of the channel, Peter Windsor, said, listen, mate, it's just it's a name. It's nominal value only. They will put other people in there, mention no names, Jenson Button as ambassador to go and do Adrian Newey's dirty work. Now, Adrian Newey won't have to be front and centre talking to the bloody press and media because he'll be too focused on the car, and that's the way it should be. So then why call that dude team principal? Feels like a contradiction in terms ever so slightly, but per Peter Windsor, he's only team principal so that he gets carte blanche, can do what he wants to do in order to design himself a god tier race car in 2026. Asked about the team principal role, just like Peter Windsor, friend of the channel, Adrian Newey says, I became a team principal toward the end of last year. In many ways to me, though, it is simply a title. Oh, the humanity. On the money again, Windsor. The role within the team is to try to provide direction, an ethos, a culture that we will all work by. I try to lead by example where possible, but really it's about developing everybody. We're trying to develop at all levels, so we're working well together, which means we'll get the best out of the car. Is it working? Is the follow-up question. I will tell you later. Ask me that question at the end of the year. Reminiscent of Adrian Newey saying that Aston Martin didn't have the right people in the right places, that you can throw all of the hundreds of millions of dollars at a circumstance, at a problem, with a view to solve for it and build a car. But if you haven't got the right people in the right places, as Red Bull have done for the past 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years, then there's no dice. You're not going to get anything done. On the subject of working well together, this is a huge year for some of our partners. Aramco, oh, the humanity. Look at this. One of the key aspects, says Newey, of this year's regulations is the new power units, and with that comes the move to using fully sustainable fuel for the first time in Formula One. Aramco are absolutely pivotal for us this year because of how they develop fuel, as are Valvoline, which is developing the oil to suit the work Honda is doing, and are playing a big part of a very complicated but very important equation. No kidding, Sherlock. And herein lies the problem for many. The Fernando Alonso and Adrian Newey naysayers that car can be an aerodynamic beast, but in 2026 what's most important is the power unit and the fuel and the way they interact. We know already that Koji Watanabe, head of the Honda power unit program, came out and said that they were struggling, that potentially the power unit going into 2026 early, homologated by the way, will be underpowered and overweight. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem reminiscent of the early days of Red Bull, when then it was Renault that was sandbagging the otherwise god tier package that Adrian Newey had birthed. It feels like in F1, history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it does rhyme. Without having a technical partner and a fuel supplier with Aramco's expertise, Honda's development of the power unit would be restricted, and that in turn would restrict us. Oh, the humanity. He's using the language already. Bottleneck settings at the altar, not necessarily Aramco, but Honda. This work Aramco is doing is going to stand us in very good stead. Aramco are absolutely all in on this project, aren't they? Becoming a technical supplier of ours has been a change for Aramco. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Can you say culpability? How so? Adrian Newey explains Aramco have had to reorganize. They've had to expand their facilities in certain areas to suit what is a very specific challenge, developing a fuel for a Formula One team. Oh, the humanity. He continues. Yeah, and this is the philosophical point, the secret sauce of the Adrian Newey car, if we haven't touched on it already, that the design of the car is about the holistic package. There's no one individual part that's likely to make the difference. It's how all of those parts come together and interact with each other. Therefore, again, I will cite his book. There's a brilliant reference in there where he talks about Senna's death, and he says the biggest lesson that he learned was to adapt ahead of a brand new rule and reg set, not to build the suspension in a silo, not to look solely focus on the aero, to build them in synchronicity, because that's where your advantage will come. That's ultimately what some say caused Senna's death in 1994. And Adrian Newey in his book doesn't say this explicitly, but he blames himself because he didn't read the room. He didn't get the assignment. The Alonso curse will continue, Nando. I'm not sure. There's a growing... Go on, let me tell you this then. If you're talking about Fernando Alonso, there's a growing feeling that he might be in for some race wins this year. But again, it's dependent on wholly dependent on that Honda power unit. If again, we're talking about design synchronicity, right? Adrian is the best F1 designer by far. The stats don't lie. He's not bad, is he, John? He's not bad. The Maximilian Verstappen, some say, of aerodynamicists. He isn't bad. Keep it F1 centric, says John. The smells of passing F1 cars back in Sterling, Mansell, Watkins, Glen. Oh gosh, you're going back now, guy. Let me show you this though. This is important. So we're talking about Fernando Alonso holistically, and we're talking about Adrian Newey and AML 26. Its chances of being a championship contender. You've got to look at the odds right now. I understand some people say that odds are nonsense. What do the odds makers know? But if there is a better barometer for the feeling and sentiment, the chances that one driver and one car is capable of winning races and therefore championships, I know not of it. Let me show you this. This is important, courtesy of the old Polymaker. Over there, they've come up with a couple of different things. Here we go. I'm going to show you this. This is important. Currently, George Russell gone clear. You can see he's... In fact, let me make this a bit bigger so you guys can see it better. This is important stuff here. I want to give proper context. Right, so you guys can see here. Right. Top line on the graph, George Russell, 30% of the time. If you run the Driver Championship 100 times, they say that he will win 30 of them under the current circumstances. Now, only as soon as, or as recently as January the 22nd, George and Max, their odds were moving almost in lockstep. 26% for Max, 25% for George. Now look, oh, the humanity. The trend is your friend, some say, until there is a bend. Max Verstappen at 20%. I mean, if you were a Max Verstappen fan and appreciated his talents, then you won't be too saddened at seeing that. Let me show you this as well. In fact, you guys can't see it. Let me show you this. This is important. In stark contrast, Lando Norris, as recently as December the 18th, 21%. Again, not quite lockstep with George Russell and Max Verstappen, then favourites both. But nearly. Look what's happened since. Everybody's fallen out of love with Lando and or McLaren. And in stark contrast, what's Fernando Alonso doing? Once upon a time, 6% of the time odds makers said that Fernando Alonso would win. Now, check this out. Where's Fernando? Oh, the humanity. 9% as near as makes no difference. Up, chat. 4 percentage points. That is chaos. Some say, therefore, that Fernando Alonso has himself a not bad chance of winning a Look at that, up 4 percentage points. In stark contrast, Max Verstappen down 11 percentage points. Lando Norris down even more at 15 percentage points. The exam question that we need answers for is, what sort of money is this coming in for Fernando Alonso? Is it just standard punter money? Or is it in the know money? Because that then makes all the difference, right? Is it noddies like me and you that fancy Alonso because the car looks sexy? Or is it in the know Aston Martin money that realise that Adrian Newey may well have designed himself yet another championship winning car? I know not the answers to these questions. Can't trust Polymarket. You know what, Nando? True. I mean, but it is a market. If you trust free market mechanism, then you've got, and the joke is, Nando, I checked my own bookmaker just to see whether those numbers are in line with generally accepted practice, and they are broadly. Sitting back in that deck chair, Fernando El Plan. You guys let me know whether you think Fernando can throw his hat into the driver championship arena, because there is a growing sentiment. I don't know whether it's because the car just looked advanced and sexy, or because it's Adrian Newey, or a confluence of the aforementioned. But I think it's going to get I think it may get techier than techie things, especially if Honda can deliver on their promise and deliver Adrian Newey into that AMR 26, a championship package of a power unit. Even better, best car to win. Reggae says, you're saw Fernando's car collection. I know he has great taste, is he? Is he, of course, alludes to the fact that he's got an F40. He has himself, does he have himself a 260 GTO? He's got an AMGR, an AMG CLK, AMG GTR, I want to say. Is that right? He's got cars anyway for days. He's got all of the bloody cars. The sexy Audi Quattro. Red Bull is looking good, so I don't know where the -11 comes from. Pure smoke. Croying, I think people have looked at the Barcelona test, haven't they? And they're just like, well, I mean, it's a zero-sum game. Are they better or worse than Mercedes? And if they're worse, then odds are going to start to drift. Like, sadly, maybe they overcooked. There's the Max Verstappen factor as well that you want to bake into that, since he's so good, such a difference maker, or at least he has been for the past 2 or 3 years. Since the Aramco Honda, I believed El Plan 33, when Newey came by, the thing felt like absolute cheating. I know it's not a bad combination. Fernando, if he's had his Weetabix alongside Adrian Newey, it's going to be chaos. You can't bet against Newey, but is the Honda PU ready? No, it's not, mate. This is the problem there. No, it's not. And I'm not sure the Aramco fuel is either. That's the problem. As much as an aero beast as that AMR 26 looks on paper, I think it's going to get a bit... I think Honda might have let the side down. And that's why, chat, Aston Martin and Honda were protesting on Monday around the bloody compression ratios that they've missed, or at the very least not implemented, and will be protesting again on Thursday. I'm telling you, they're going to need to do something here. They're going to need some form of special dispensation, because it feels like Mercedes absolutely have the whip hand. No one knows the future, but you can risk assess it. Very well said, Graham. Assign some probabilities, right? George has been teaching Kimi wrong. How many people got yeeted off this year? I don't know. I don't think George has it in him to teach anyone, you know. I think he's a snake of an F1 peddler. Not in a bad way, but in a very self-serving way. He does for him. Agencies front and centre. That's all that he lives for, is 25 points. Who wins, George versus Max? Well, I mean, George in a Mercedes and Max in a Red Bull power unit, a Red Bull Ford car. Oh, the humanity indeed, EasyJ. I think it will get techie. Now, on occasion, Max can be the difference, but depending on how good or how bad that Ford PU is, or Red Bull Ford branded PU, I just think it's going to be, I don't know. There's only so much difference that one can make. They'll need to be close. They'll need to be close to Mercedes early on. Or, as at race 6, there will need to be some changes. And again, that's rumoured, so who knows? Could get techie. Mercedes on top, probably with Kimi Antonelli doing very good. Izzy, a lot of people have talked about Kimi Antonelli potentially having a 2007 Lewis Hamilton-esque season versus Fernando El Pan Alonso. That potentially Kimi might take more points off of King George Russell. than most anticipate. Oh, the humanity indeed. Look, let's hope we can have a Mercedes versus Red Bull versus Ferrari versus Aston Martin. That would be techie Neil, but I mean, are you invested in Father Christmas coming down the chimney and delivering your Christmas presents this year? When has that ever happened? The problem is, because it's a brand new rule and reg set, in the first year, 1 or 2 or 3 teams always makes a leap, right? And it sounds and looks and feels like. Imagine a world, go on, let's play this through. Imagine a world where Mercedes was sandbagging at the Barcelona test. Imagine a world where Mercedes keep sandbagging, as were Red Bull in 2022. Imagine they just keep all this advantage in their back pocket, because they don't want the FIA to know, nor do they want the FIA to do as their strategic objectives dictate they should, which is levelling the competitive landscape. Already, not a wheel has been turned for this season, private testing only, and they're talking about doing something even before the season starts. Race 6 potentially, you've got the PUAC talking about a framework within which they can correctly, accurately and very robustly assess compression ratios. That's how big a deal this thing is going to be. An epic. It is his hope in silent deal. I have faith in Kimi, Robin, King George of many. I think he'll be. I think a lot of people would be surprised at Kimi. The problem with these young drivers is this: just like Oscar did between 25 and 24, early on in the career, their growth curve is almost parabolic, right? You look at Carlos Sainz. Carlos will learn and he'll develop. He'll still incrementally improve season on season. But the rate at which he improves will be almost exponentially less than that of a Kimi or an Oscar. So the Kimi Raikkonen, Freudian slip settings, the Kimi Antonelli that you see in early stage 2026 will be a very different entity from the Kimi Raikkonen. Look at that. Apparently I want him to come back from the Kimi Antonelli that you saw this time last year. Brand new. Everything was just do you know what I mean? He was an F1 virgin. Now, however, you're going to start to see, I'm not saying that his improvement will be parabolic, not just yet, but it will start to do one of these, right? It will start to be vertical, just like Oscar Piastri was last year. New dude, especially those first 10 races, he just looked like, you know, faster than Lando, who is very fast. It happens sometimes. Merc 1-2, or Merc 1, Red Bull 2, McLaren 3, Aston Martin 4. How could one possibly know with such conviction? Kimi is absolutely awesome, no doubt. He's not bad. He's not a bad peddler. Honestly, my sentiment on Hadjar is exactly the same. So what's the play on Hadjar, chat? I don't know. I keep seeing them replay the bloody time when he avoided Iwasa in the tunnel. Do you remember that? There are these times in Formula One where you've got to stand up and take notice. There's the time Fernando Alonso 130R on Michael Schumacher, 2 years back to back. There were times when the next one comes along and shows you something and you've got to take notice. Maybe Kimi Antonelli that time at Monza, you know what I mean, when he had a higher minimum speed than everybody on them soft compound tyres. But I think if you're going to take notice of Hadjar, it was his reactions in the bloody Monaco tunnel. That's a bit different, that is. That's Neo in the Matrix-esque. You know what I mean? You've got to stand up and take notice of that. That's Hadjar telling us that he's onto something. Now, poison chalice settings, context important. Don't think that he's gonna. I mean, 2007 Lewis happens sometimes, but you think he's gonna come and have more firepower than Max Verstappen? Good luck, mate. Good luck. I think it'll be taken for him. Ferrari will be good at the start, but the team can't develop. Reggae. Okay, Reggie. Will Ferrari be good at the start? I tell you what, I'll switch the question ever so slightly. Ferrari will need to be good at the start if people want to keep their jobs. You know what I mean? Frederick Vasseur et al. They will need to be good. They'll need a car. I tell you what gives Ferrari some hope. What doesn't give Ferrari hope is that Lewis Hamilton is now fraternising with a Kardashian, no less. Do you know what I mean? Can you say focus or lack thereof? It's not going to, what, can you wait another, you've waited long enough, Lewis, to build a relationship with do you know what I mean? Chill out for another 12 months, but especially if you're going to get into the Kardashian family. Oh, the humanity. Can you imagine? He's going to be obliged to turn up to Thanksgiving and Christmas. Oh gosh, Lewis is such a mistake. The curse of the Kardashians is metronomic, worse than Drake. Every time Drake turns up to a sports event, the person who he's backing loses. And I think Kardashian is the same. I mean, Kanye, Lamar, bloody Chris, what's his name? Reggie, but it's just... There is no more guaranteed recipe for sports failure than to attach oneself to the Kardashian family. It's hilarious, people not acknowledging Newey. No, they'll know. Are you saying that fairer sex is distracting or that Kim Kardashian is? I'll tell you what I'm saying, Neil. I'm telling you that Lewis for the longest time has been saying that he doesn't want to build a family yet until he... I mean, this isn't to say, who am I to say about it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm not. I'm no one's keeper. Definitely not Lewis Hamilton's keeper. He's a grown man, 41 years old. He can do whatever he wants, right? However, if I'm wanting Lewis Hamilton to win races and therefore championships, this is the one person that I wouldn't want to see in it. No slant against Kim Kardashian. She's a billionaire in and of her own right. But I don't know. Can you spell distraction? Settings. Here's hoping. Camera gets getting married. No, I could never. Does Lewis really like women? Apparently. And who am I to not take him at his word? Ferrari not missing out on a marking opportunity. Lewis Hamilton's extension is thwarted. No, TMM. So go on. Here's the story about that Lewis Hamilton extension. You recall Manish Pandey. Some say that he's not an insider, but I disagree. He said that the rumour coming out of Ferrari, by dint, no doubt, of Luca Montezemolo is this. The Lewis Hamilton, if he doesn't like what he sees in the Ferrari at the private test Barcelona last week, that he wouldn't even race this year. You know what I mean? He'd do an Alain Prost 1992, just sack it off. Come back, do you know what I mean? And Lewis Hamilton fans, cult LH, don't want to admit to that, but they're not his keeper. No one controls him. As if he hasn't given 20 years to F1. Hasn't he given enough? Can he not go off into the sunset when he's ready? No, he's got to be at the behest of the fan. But no, he'll never quit, never give. No, sometimes you got to give up. Sometimes you have to throw the towel in Apollo Creed settings. You know what I mean? Sometimes you must. Gonna wait until the bets hit 60 to 1 again. Oh my gosh, Shailesh. Almost got it. Missed out on 1 point. Love your content. I guess we won't know until Melbourne qualifying. Shailesh, you're a legend and far too kind. 60 to 1 was crazy, Max Verstappen. I mean, Barcelona. Techie. Why did Peter say he can't... On yesterday's stream, says Pecky, why did Peter say he can't say where some team principles came from? What did he mean by that? I don't know. Pecky, I'll have to ask him. Not going to lie, whoever decided to hire Newey at Ferrari must be kicking themselves right now, seeing what Newey's come up with 100%, mate. Neil. But the problem is, mate, Newey comes with... One doesn't just sign Adrian Newey. You have to give of yourself to the So already you can hear the way that the engineers are talking. Oh, he's asking to, you know what I mean? Rob Marshall, oh God, now he's asking to put the bloody cars right next to the engine, so we're going to have to repackage this. It's hard working with Adrian Newey, this thing. It's not an easy, you know what I mean? He's the colleague that when he comes in the door, he's just, oh gosh, this guy again. But ultimately, him being so challenging is going to spur on it, just like he talks about, spur on a team, like get them working together and, do you know what I mean? Goal congruence, like all moving forward motion. That's what Adrian Newey is about. But to get that, you've got to tick certain boxes on. And this occasion, it was all about equity. Now, Lawrence Stroll said that when he gets passionate about something, he wins. And again, he was prepared to pay that tax, wasn't he? Like, he's a equity guy now. Proper. That's ownership. Of all the people Lewis could have chosen to be with, and he says he doesn't like Mr. Hoppy, I think Lewis has got a type, do you know what I mean? If past his prologue. I mean, I wasn't surprised. I was only surprised to see that he might be dating Kim Kardashian. Only insofar as the Kardashian curse is a real thing, right? But as far as Lewis's personal preference in the opposite sex, I mean, I'd be an abbot of a reason to be surprised, right? Nicole, Kim. It's hilarious watching people say Newey has cooked, or this team has done this and that with no reference point to measure. Yeah, you know, Kevo Rev, you make the point, and you're far too kind. So you do make the point. It's a bit too soon. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's a bit premature to crown Fernando Alonso a champion. But sometimes, Kevo Rev, isn't F1 Barbershop Talk fun? To speculate. Maybe you're going to see a third Alonso championship. Do you know what I mean? It does look like Adrian, who has designed himself something that's innovative at the very least. It looks different to the rest. The back, the suspension is chaos, the linkage, the bloody side pods. It just looks different all over. I mean, Scarbs went on Windsor's pod and said that it looks like he's designed a fully fledged, not 26 iteration, but a 27 iteration of car, and that's where it's going to get techie. Would love to see a Twitter beef between Team LH and Team YE. I don't know who YE is. Don't know. Kevo Rev says, we don't know how this is going to shake out. 100% Kevo Rev. I take your point. Anyone who does is a fool. No. Everybody's, I mean, it's hard to predict the future. My crystal ball is as murky as the next person's, but it is fun to speculate, Kevo Rev. And that's okay. That's part of the magic of Formula One. I can't wait to be completely proved wrong. The unexpected is what drives this. But 100%, mate. And to that final stanza, Kevo Rev, the unexpected is what drives this sport. And that's why it feels like they're bloody scampering, that the regulatory body is doing everything in its power to try and ensure parity, or at least more parity than they think at the moment. Because Mercedes have the whip hand at the altar of the following things. Not just is it the power unit, not just is it the bloody compression ratio design philosophy loophole, not just is it the weight that they won't need to carry because of the efficient power unit, so they won't need to fill their car full of fuel as, let's say, I don't know, Red Bull, Ford, or Scuderia Ferrari, so their car will be lighter. It is, again, it's all of the aforementioned, right? It is all of the aforementioned together. So I don't know, it's going to get techie. It is going to get very techie. Oh, sorry, yeah, Team LH and Team, oh my gosh, forget it. Yay, sorry. Why is Yay entered the F1 chat? The Kardashian curse has already been... This is what I'm saying, TWM. Has Yee even remembered who he is? I remember I keep saying Yee. Is Yay? Does he even know who he is again? You've seen some of those comments that you can't even. And Kanye used to be one of the bloody... musically... My Dark Twisted Fantasy, one of the best albums that I've ever listened to. And what's he doing now? You don't date a Kardashian, and it's like a big fight, isn't it? Sometimes you're never the same afterwards. And therein lies the problem. Hamilton having a full blown midlife crisis. I don't care who he's with, says Rick. Me neither, Riaz. But you've got to pay attention to the most recent evidence, right? Nico Rosberg's selfies, oh my gosh. He is Kanye West again. I don't even know if he is. Yeezy has classic material, 100%. We'll have to have the music conversation another time, but I'm here for it. I'm hoping that Sir Lewis Hamilton can get his head there. You know, the best thing that could happen to Sir Lewis? That Kim says, you know what, I'm not going to say, let's check back in 12 months' time, mate. Once you finish with your F1 thing, let's touch base then. And if we're going to build a relationship, then cool. Or just cuts him off altogether. I think the best thing that ever happened to Sir Lewis Hamilton, because the Kardashian curse is real. You guys have been legends, one and all. I appreciate each and every single one of you. To the moon and back. We go again tomorrow, 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. 10 a.m. potentially. I don't know just yet, because work is chaos. Between then and now, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.